McAllister, Serbia.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honour for me to present the first draft of the resolution on the 2014 Progress Report on Serbia. This is not only the first draft of this particular resolution, it's also my first draft as the new standing rapporteur for Serbia. Since it's better to see something once than to hear or read about it 1,000 times, I visited Serbia for a whole week in November last year. I met Prime Minister Vučić, I met Foreign Minister Dačić, I met Patriarch Irine, members of the opposition parties, NGOs, representatives from the economic sector and from civil society. A lot of things I heard and observed in Belgrade and Novi Sad were essential for my report. Now, the draft consists of 24 paragraphs and 6 pages. I tried to keep it as short and precise as possible. Looking back, 2014 was an important year for Serbia. The formal beginning of the accession talks took place on the 21st of January at the first EU-Serbia Intergovernmental Conference. The technical screening process is on its way and has already been completed for now 26 chapters. The high level of preparedness and engagement in the screening process of the EU acquis demonstrated by the Serbian government is most welcome. In general, I am convinced Prime Minister Vučić and his government show commitment to the European integration process and tackle head-on the fundamental and socio-economic reforms. In recent months, Serbia adopted important laws on whistleblowers, on media, on labour, on privatisation and on bankruptcy. This is a positive development. Nevertheless, a thorough implementation of legislation and policies remain a key indicator of a successful integration process. I would like to stress 4 points. Firstly, the rule of law. The Serbian government has a strong political impetus to fight corruption. However, significant efforts are needed to enhance and fully enforce the legal framework for the fight against corruption. Another point, I would like to stress the importance of guaranteeing the rights of the opposition. Currently, too many laws are adopted under the urgency procedure, which is not allowing for sufficient stakeholders' consultation. Furthermore, observers I spoke to in Belgrade are concerned about deteriorating conditions for the full exercise of freedom of expression in Serbia. I would like to underline that the freedom of media represents a basic element of democracy. Secondly, the economy. We should encourage the Serbian government and all the Serbian authorities to undertake further structural economic reforms, to improve the investment climate, to combat the high level of unemployment, and to continue to carry out fiscal consolidation. The business environment needs to be improved by implementing the planned structural reforms in this area and by strengthening the legal system. However, we should also bear in mind that the floods of May 2014 in Serbia had a negative impact on the economy and also, of course, on the people living there. Thirdly, foreign policy. We all know the rules are clear. Candidate countries have to align to the EU acquis, and this applies to foreign policy too. Now, we all know Serbia has historically close relations with Russia. Nevertheless, I regret that Serbia didn't align itself, when invited by the European Council, with restrictive measures against Russia. On the other hand, I very much welcome the individual partnership action plan between NATO and the Republic of Serbia, which was signed just 4 days ago. And I also welcome Serbia's chairmanship in office of the OSCE in 2015. Serbia could use its privileged position, especially with regard to Russia, to seek solutions for the current crisis in Ukraine. And finally, fourthly, the normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina. Serbia's engagement in the normalization process with Kosovo is most welcome. Due to the early elections in Serbia and Kosovo, the pace of overall negotiations slowed down in 2014. Therefore, I welcome that after 6 months of political deadlock and wrangling between the major parties, the Kosovo Parliament appointed Mr. Mustafa as the new Prime Minister. As a result, the high-level dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo will continue here in Brussels on the 9th of February. It's extremely important that Serbia and Kosovo now go forward with the implementation of the already reached agreements. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, overall, the train from Belgrade is on its track towards Brussels. I would like to strongly encourage the Serbian government to stay on the European track. 2015 should be the year of the first negotiation chapters being opened. Personally, I hope in the first half of 2015. I would finally like to thank the AFET and EPP Secretariat for their support. Dear colleagues, I hope for a fruitful cooperation with all of you, especially, of course, with the shadow rapporteurs, in order to work towards a good result. I look forward to taking your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't find any disagreements with what Mr. McAllister said. It is absolutely clear, the basic thing that Serbia is no doubt progressing in its integration agenda. It has to be recognized, and it was recognized in this report. I think it is very important. It will be critical for Serbia to continue this reform process. We have seen difficult but much needed start of economy and social reforms. I expect the continuous progress in the reforming of judiciary. Chapters 23 and 24 will be crucial in the integration negotiations. I also want to welcome rapporteurs' call on Serbia to alignment in the CSFP, especially in case of Russia. And at the same time, Serbia will have the unique opportunity to prove it could be useful while being the chairman of the OSCE. Very telegraphically, it's important to continue engagement in dialogue with Kosovo. Implementation should be the word of all those agreements which were signed. I also think that chapter which contains relations with Kosovo should be opened early in the negotiations process. It will be important for Serbia to keep good relations with other countries in the region. It was good that visit of Prime Minister of Albania happened to Serbia despite all these interesting developments around it. As I mentioned, the reform of judiciary is an important mark of the progress in the integration. I also agree with the rapporteur on his critical remarks concerning freedom of media. It's important that general atmosphere around the media freedom is improved and transparency of the media ownership is strengthened and threats against journalists are properly addressed. One thing, Mr. Chairman, I would like to mention a point concerning the general commitment of the Western Balkan countries to the long-term EU policies. I'm mentioning this in relation with planned investments in the region, especially in the energy sector. I was following China CE summit, which took place in Belgrade last year. It was agreed that investment will be done in the energy sector, coal power plant. It was agreed that investment will be done, and since these are going to be long-term investment, it will be important to think about some of these projects in perspective of the EU policies. Just to mention that Falun Gong incident during that meeting, I think it will be necessary to ask for the explanation. And there are many other issues in the David's report. I want to appreciate his personal commitment to this report and to praise him for the good work which he has done so far. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will speak in Slovene language, that it will be closer to our, hopefully, Serbian friends as well. Najprej bi se želela,
First of all, I'd like to thank the rapporteur, David McAllister, for this excellent, concise and pithy report. I think some parts possibly could be improved, but I'm convinced that together with the rapporteur we'll be able to achieve that. The past year for Serbia has been a dynamic one. There have been many important events that have taken place. The start of accession negotiations, parliamentary elections, high-ranking visits to Belgrade. The diplomatic activity of Serbia has been strengthened, and in the region Serbia has played a very important role. But the past year has also been difficult because of the floods that affected civilians, affected the infrastructure there, but also the economy. The rapporteur has sounded a note of warning about the situation in the media, which is getting worse and worse, and I share his concerns there. In the accession negotiations, no new chapters have been opened. I find that regrettable. At the start of the year, Serbia took over the OSCE leadership, which is something I welcome, and I hope that Serbia can use its diplomatic network to resolve conflicts within the OSCE region. I hope they'll exploit those links they have to work on the situation in Ukraine. I find the situation in the media extremely worrying. I'm following the situation of the media in Serbia very closely, and we can see that there is a situation which is worsening, and it's maybe comparable to the situation under Milosevic. The working conditions that journalists have to work in are getting worse and worse. The property structures in the media is problematic. And Vučić has pointed the finger at certain media of disseminating lies, and this is inappropriate. That's why I'd like to underscore the fact that the freedom of the media and the plurality of opinion is a sign of the health of a society, and I think Serbia has to do much more on this front because the situation is far from acceptable. Maybe I could just pass a comment on the LGBTI community. I'm very pleased that the Pride Parade took place in Belgrade in September last year. It's very important that fundamental rights are being strengthened. And in the Serbian constitution we have Article 14, but the LGBTI community needs to be better protected. My final point concerns the relations between Serbia and Kosovo. On the 9th of February, there is meant to be a presidential meeting between the two countries. We have seen Brussels serve as a broker in these relations, and we hope that there will be a normalization of relations as quickly as possible here. And finally, I'd like to say that it is high time that Serbia opens a new chapter in accession negotiations. The new year shouldn't just be more dynamic, not just as dynamic as the past year, but it should be a year where new aspects flow into the negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the ECR, I too congratulate my colleague David McAllister in his debut as the Standing Rapporteur for Serbia and his excellent presentation. His approach has been commendable and very diligent, I have to say. Overall, my group welcomes the progress made by Serbia in several fields like fighting corruption, administrative reforms and improving relations with Kosovo, and I'm assured by the High Representative that the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue will continue under her mandate. I do still have concerns, however, about the new Article 234, as I still receive complaints by investors that their assets have been arbitrarily dispossessed under the old law and will continue to do so under the new law. I strongly agree with Mr. Kukan's comments about the need to continuously monitor the functioning of the judiciary, which requires better training and a guaranteed sense of independence. I too welcome the good relations between Serbia and Kosovo, but I'm also the standing rapporteur for Montenegro, and I think the relations there bilaterally have been excellent, with high-level visits politically on both sides, and the implementation of a bilateral extradition treaty to prevent fugitives from justice abusing the previous laws and seeking refuge in each other's countries. I also strongly would like to point out and support paragraph 8 in David McAllister's report, as I too have regularly criticised the approach taken by the Vučić-Nikolić government in trying to be best friends with Russia and feting Putin on his recent visit to Belgrade and carrying out joint military exercises at a time when Russian forces are fighting in eastern Ukraine and occupying Crimea. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to also to join the positive assessments on Mr. McAllister's premiera as rapporteur. I also got the feedback information from Serbia that they were very happy to have such an interested partner. I would like to underline that I agree with what my predecessor said, that the sector of the media is still a very vulnerable and delicate issue in Serbia. Improvement is needed. We should commend Serbia for fast improvement on the field of combating the corruption, especially the corruption on the highest level. We only can express satisfaction that the government is committed to the European prospect of Serbia. It is an important change, and it is equally important that this government has an opposition who is also dedicated to the Serbian future in the European Union, what was not the case before. I think Serbia deserves recognition for its constructive policy to the neighbors and to the courage to make straight some problems which it has with some neighboring country. I would only plea also to the rapporteur to pay attention to Vojvodina as the most advanced and pro-European part of Serbia, where autonomy of Vojvodina is under the scrutiny and it should be preserved. And then finally, I would join also as far the worry about the alignment of the Serbian foreign and defence policy with the common European defence and foreign policy. Last but not least, the question of Šešelj. I realized today that the Croatian president, new elected Croatian president, has asked Secretary General of the United Nations to intervene in that Šešelj should be returned to Hague. I think it has nothing, of course, to do with the Serbian government, and we should not blame the Serbian government for the statements which Šešelj has done. But nevertheless, I think it has something to do with us, because we passed the resolution on this issue, and we should also follow up and express our opinion about the Hague Tribunal's decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Let me, before I start commenting on the report on Serbia, just say, if we had stuck to the original plan to start at 3 o'clock, we could have easily included Mr. Brok's report from tomorrow today. And I also have to say, for my group, it's really difficult to rearrange the reports today and for tomorrow, because we have different shadows on different reports. So I would have preferred to have the schedule as it was originally. Just let me state that here. But it's definitely decided to be different. But for smaller groups, this is difficult to have such urgent changes of the agenda. So now, Let me first of all say I think it's very important that we have all the reports now here on the table and coming in the next weeks, because I think it's extremely important that the Parliament sends a clear message with these reports also to Commission President Juncker, who before he was elected had stated that there will be no enlargement within the next 5 years. Now we all know that this is a political reality, but this has caused problems of motivation in many of the countries. So I'm glad that we are here now to make sure to say the Parliament is in favour of continuing the strategy towards enlargement with all the countries of the region. Now, as to Mr. McAllister's report, I first of all would also like to thank him as a new colleague here in the working on the Western Balkans for his excellent report. I think you have done a great job in really focusing on the main issues that are at stake, and it is a pleasure to work with you on that. So I also agree totally with the aspects that you have raised. I would nevertheless like to add, because I'm not sure whether our shadow on Serbia will be here in time, because he's in Cont committee right now, and it was scheduled to be later on. I would like to say that it would be important to have some more aspects in on energy and on the environment, because there it's clear that with the European targets on emissions, Serbia will have to do a different strategy than producing electricity from coal. So I think there are several issues that we would like and we will put as amendments, because I think there still something needs to be added. I'm glad you put the relationships with Russia in your report, and specifically to the relationship between Serbia and Kosovo. Thank you for all as rapporteur for Kosovo, which I'll talk about later, the important things that you mentioned in here. Let me also say, I think it would be good if we then, in the process of amendments, would also put a point in where we ask for the Serbian Prime Minister, who visited Kosovo last week, that if he goes and visits the Serb communities in Kosovo, which is important, that he also schedules a visit with the Kosovo Prime Minister, because that's part of good neighbourly relations, yeah? That you also meet with your counterparts in the country. So I think that will be important. Apart from that, I find it's good that you mentioned the elections to the National Minority Councils that happened in October 2014. I think we nevertheless should also mention the high number of Roma among Serbs seeking asylum in the European Union, and that we would call on the Serbian authorities to take more effective measures to facilitate their integration into Serbia's society. I think these would be things that I would ask you to also agree with us then in the process of the meetings with the shadows. And for sure that I think it's clear, and you have said that the full normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo is a precondition for Serbia's accession to the EU, and that also Serbia should reform its constitution accordingly, because otherwise I don't think there will be a majority of having or an agreement in this union to accept Serbia. And I'm saying that with great support for the process of Serbia towards the European Union. Thank you. I added something on the general issues before, if you remember well.
Hello.
Grazie Presidente. Desidero ringraziare.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I want to congratulate our rapporteur, Mr. McAllister, as well for the excellent report. And I wanted to ask a direct question also, because it's often a good idea to turn difficulties into challenges. From the 15th of January, Serbia has assumed the chairmanship in office of the OSCE. Now, don't you believe that given its traditional excellent relations with Russia and its commitment towards Europe, which, according to the report, is looking good, wouldn't it be a good idea perhaps to involve Serbia as a kind of mediator in the crisis in Ukraine, given its geographical location as well? I also wanted to agree with colleagues' call when it comes to press freedom to encourage the Serbian government to take courageous steps forward
there. And as our colleague Mrs. Lunacek was so correctly saying earlier, we would also like to see more in-depth commitment to, for example, environmental issues, which are often pretty thorny ones for accession states. Thank you.
Oui, merci. Merci, Président.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would like to underscore the importance of my colleague David McAllister's report. There are a couple of points I'd like to underscore. 8 on sanctions. Serbia has to adopt a position here. I mean, we need to put these questions too. What's the legal basis that these sanctions would be based on under international law? I don't understand what the legal value of this is. I think there's a court case that could be taken here. On what basis would these restrictive measures or sanctions be based? What legal basis? The second point that I'd like to touch on is 22, when he's talking about unbundling in the gas sector. That doesn't seem to be possible in Serbia, and I think this will generate a lack of security when it comes to energy in this country.
Merci, Président. Avant de dire...
Thank you, Chairman. Well, before I talk about Serbia, I'd maybe just like to say something about Bosnia-Herzegovina, because I'm in charge of that one. We're not discussing that today, but in the Bosnian press, the question is begged, why aren't we discussing Bosnia? Well, it's because we're discussing it next month. It's not the first time that these debates have been split. So I think there needs to be an opportunity given to allow people to get down to work there. So I'd like to echo the congratulations for David McAllister, and I would like to underscore what he said about chapters 23 and 24. I do hope they start work on that soon. I would like to express an element of surprise that President Vučić has said that the European Union is paying NGOs to criticise his government. That really shows a lack of faith, and I don't think that's going in the right direction. He retracted those remarks, but I think in future we're going to have to avoid this kind of situation. And then maybe just something along the following lines. Looking at what Mr. Hahn said, Commissioner Hahn, in December on the convergence of the foreign affairs policies, especially on Russia. All the more this is important given the paradox, at least from our perspective, when it comes to Serbia, with 52% of people who are in favour of Russia and only 32% who are positive vis-à-vis the European Union. So if the government's going to play on, how should I put this, a certain distance that's been taken vis-à-vis the opposition, we have to understand the backdrop against which that needs to be seen. I know I've got 3 more seconds, so I'd like to say a few comments on paragraph 11. I think the important positive role that Serbia's played in the region is important. In paragraph 17, I think we should underscore the importance of media freedom there. Then we have the national minority councils and the problems with the elections there. Sorry for going over time there.
Hvala, predsjedniče. Napredak Srbije na...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. European progress for Serbia is extremely important because this is a country which, objectively speaking, has a special responsibility for the quality of relations between the Western Balkan states and including those who are member states and potential member states in their membership bid. Progress in Serbia is visible, and Mr. McAllister has spoken in detail about this. And what remains of their duties is to confirm, on a more than only a level of declaration, a positive attitude towards ethnic minorities, especially concerning the right to have an education in their own mother tongues. And all who are calling for a renewal of conflicts in the area should be put into check, and their domestic national authorities have to regulate and adopt proper sanctions when it comes to hate speech. Their parliament recently made a declaration concerning the case of Vojislav Šešelj, but unfortunately Mr. Dačić did not convince us that the government in Belgrade reacted promptly in this case. The government in Belgrade should be inspired to more actively participate in border issues with their neighbors, and as a candidate country to harmonize their foreign policies with the interests of the European Union. We do not have to state especially how much the Brussels agreement and dialogue with Pristina is important for the European perspective of Serbia. And I believe that the chairmanship of Serbia in the OSCE will be another stimulus for internal reorganization. Thank you.
Hvala lijepo, gospodine predsjedniče.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It is with regret that I have to note that Serbia Progress Report and the draft resolution by Mr. McAllister does not mention breaches of human rights and rule of law in Serbia caused by the implementation of the law on organization and jurisdiction of government authorities of Serbia in prosecuting persons guilty of war crimes. And I would like this to be put into the resolution. This Act came into force in 2010, and Serbia granted itself a universal jurisdiction in conducting procedures for criminal offenses on the territory of Republic of Croatia. And this put into question the sovereignty of our country, as well as that of 18 member states from which people came to defend Croatia. Through this law, Serbia took the right to try a Croatian war veteran, Veljko Marić, a Croatian citizen, who is tried for an alleged crime committed on the Croatian territory against another Croatian citizen. So such actions are in breach of international criminal law, and it's a prerogative taken only by the UN and in exceptional circumstances. So if this law remains unchanged, the same thing may happen to citizens of Great Britain, Germany, France, Netherlands, Hungary, Austria, Belgium, Italy, Slovakia, Ireland, Bulgaria, Denmark, who defended Croatia. Veljko Marić has been in a Serbian prison for 5 years. His human rights are being breached, which I testified personally, and I asked for an inquiry on the behalf of the European Commission. The Commission stated it considers reforms of rule of law very important, and that efficient and non-biased defense in court cases related to war crimes is one of priorities. So I ask of the European Commission to confirm their attitude and include as a benchmark for opening of Chapter 23 the putting out of force of the mentioned law. I also ask that human rights of Veljko Marić be protected and an urgent transfer to Croatia ensured in order to enable a fair trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I wish to commend our rapporteur for a very balanced and well-done draft report on Serbia's progress. The EU accession is proved to be a very powerful vehicle for reforms in any single country which undergoes those transformations. Well, Serbia is not exception, and I wish Serbia good success in social, political and economic reforms this country still has to tackle. At the same time, as we know, the European Union is taking more and more effective actions in order to build up common, I emphasize, common foreign and security policy. Here we see quite a possibility for Serbia to advance. Serbia abstained from taking more cohesive approach with the European Union concerning Russia. And this is really a very important moment of expressing solidarity among the member states. I wish Serbia was more inclined to support European Union's point of view on this policy line, and I hope in years to come we will see more and more cohesive Serbia's policy line in this respect. Again, once we build the negotiating tactics with Serbia, probably those chapters which still needs to be more advanced from Serbia's side should be put in a more advanced stage and in an early stage of opening in order to ask Serbia to comply with those policy lines, not to postpone it for future. So I hope this draft will become a very good basis for our approval, and I wish our rapporteur a good job in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased that several colleagues have referred to Serbia's CIO position on the OSCE. Obviously, Mr McAllister has referred to it in his report as well. At last week's plenary, Vice President and Commissioner Mogherini spoke of her wish for the European Union to become a superpower of peace. Because of the traditional history, psychological and orthodox ties between Serbia and Russia, would this not be an opportunity in the best interest of regional security to try to use Serbia's unique position as a genuine broker? And accordingly, I'm questioning point 8 of Mr McAllister's resolution, specifically in relation for the call to align foreign security policy in Serbia with that of the European Union. I'd like to pick up on Mrs Lunacek's comments. As someone myself, proud of my own Roma and Gypsy heritage, I fully support what you said, but looking at the treatment of Roma already in some member states within the European Union, it's a very hopeful thing, but I wouldn't hold my breath, madam. Colleagues, but my colleague from Croatia at the other end also spoke about the war crimes issue. Of course, as so many people in this room wish for Serbia to eventually join the European Union, that could open another can of worms because, of course, were Serbia to be a member of the European Union, European arrest warrants would come into play, and might this not lead to an opportunity for old scores to be settled, and it could actually lead to further tensions in the area with EAWs going between former enemies. Thank you.
Hvala lijepo. Želim pozdraviti.
Thank you. I would like to welcome Mr. McAllister's report and all his efforts. It is beyond dispute that Serbia has progressed, but I have few issues that I wanted to touch upon. This is the relation towards Russia that we mentioned the last time as well. Mr. McAllister called Serbia to harmonize its foreign policy with that of the European Union, and the flirting with Russia is something that cannot be accepted. Related to a constructive neighborhood policy, we know that it is constructive, but there are still few open issues, and I believe that we will have to talk about this. For example, the Danube border of Serbia and Croatia, then missing persons, over 1,600 missing persons from Croatia, for which we do not know where they were buried or what happened to them, and also there are some cultural heritage goods, which are a debatable issue. Then we have to talk about opening up of Yugoslav archives, and the Serbian authorities do not wish to debate this at present. Then Mr. Veljko Marić and his human rights are another issue, and this universal jurisdiction of Serbia when it comes to war crimes is something that cannot hold ground. Another issue are national minorities. When talking about reciprocity, which has been agreed before 2005 between Croatia and Serbia, Serbs in Croatia have guaranteed 3 places in the parliament, whereas Croatians, who are the 4th minority in Serbia, do not have any such guarantees. So I believe this is something to be mentioned in the future as well. There is also the speech, the hate speech that was mentioned when we were working on the resolution on war criminal Šešelj, and I believe that such things should not happen today, but it is still something that has not been condemned on behalf by the Serbian authorities. Now, considering that this report is still in the making, I believe we will have enough room for certain improvements and small progress. Thank you.
Hvala lijepa, predsjedniče.
Thank you, Mr. Brok. I also thank our colleague, Mr. McAllister, for the draft report. on Serbia's progress. It would also be good for all neighboring countries and Serbia to fulfill all the criteria, political, social and economical. Now I would like to take a look on a few issues that I believe are very important in the context of this report. First of all, we have had a chance to exchange opinions with Minister Dacic in this very hall about a month and a half ago, and not then or even at a later stage have we heard anything from Serbian officials, Mr. Vucic, Mr. Nikolic, who were in the Serbian Radical Party together with Mr. Vojislav Šešelj. None of them clearly condemned his hate speech nor his messages which brought about the rhetorics used in the 1990s. And I see still that he continues to use such speech in the media. I believe that such democratic standards should be adopted by Serbia and that they should be very clear in their attitude towards a prosecuted war criminal. Another issue is that Serbia is trying to be a regional Hague tribunal. And with Article 3 of their Act on the Organization and Jurisdiction of Government Authorities in Prosecuting Persons Guilty of War Crimes, they are trying to get this universal jurisdiction in trying criminal offenses, war crimes and criminal offenses. I believe that this is something that should be touched upon, and the example of Mr. Veljko Maric is a very good example. So Serbia should choose their own path. If they wish to join the EU, then they should join the foreign policies of the EU, even regarding Russia, and especially at this moment when they are taking over the chairmanship of the OSCE. Thank you.
Благодаря ви, господин председател. Благодаря, господин председател, уважаеми колеги.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, I too would like to congratulate the rapporteur. I appreciate his efforts, but I also share the concerns expressed by our Croatian colleagues. These concerns are to do with freedom of expression and national identity. There is a problem with national minorities in Serbia. I'd like to draw your attention to a problem which is to do with native language. There is an area of the country where there are criminal proceedings by the Serbian state towards members of certain minorities. I could mention teachers, for example, who have been denied the possibility to exercise their profession because they teach in their own native language. These are problems that need to be addressed, particularly given that the country is endeavouring to become a member of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to praise the work of the rapporteur, his personal commitment and energy he put in the process. I'm also very pleased with the fact that the report is well balanced. It contains all the main general political issues, questions, but achievements as well. In my view, further help and support is needed for Serbia and the Serbian government to go further with its reform agenda. What, in my view, needs some additional observations in the report is the question of national councils and national minorities, their rights and its implementation, especially in the perspective of the action plan on the Chapter 23, which is in the making by the Serbian government as a request of the European Commission. These are the points that I wanted to make in this short observation, and but once again, thanks to the rapporteur for his great work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McAllister, honourable members, the European Commission shares the general assessment of the rapporteur, and I believe that the resolution captures well the progress made by Serbia in 2014. Serbia remains committed to its EU agenda and its reform agenda, and also Serbia played a very positive role in the regional context. The resolution also supports very adequately key ongoing reforms in Serbia, in particular in the economic and social field. And it underlines with great clarity the points of concerns of the European Parliament, many of which were expressed in the debate now. And I would like to note in particular the freedom of media and freedom of expression and the alignment to the common foreign and security policy, which are concerns which are also shared by the Commission. Accession negotiations with Serbia were launched a year ago, on 21st January 2014. The screening process is proceeding on schedule and will be finalised in March of this year. Together with the rapporteur, the European Commission is looking forward to the opening of first chapters. This very much depends on Serbia's ability to deliver qualitatively on key areas, notably on rule of law and on the normalisation of relations with Kosovo. Those key areas are to be tackled early in the negotiation process as per the negotiating framework. In all these areas, the Commission will continue to engage and support Serbia with the same spirit and with the same intensity. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. Chairman, dear ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, I would first of all like to thank Edward Kukan, the shadow rapporteurs and all other colleagues for their valuable and interesting contributions. I personally think we've got a lot of common ground to find a resolution which can be passed by a large majority in the Strasbourg plenary in March. Now, I can't go into detail because of limited time. I would just like to make a few comments. The first one is on foreign policy. Mr. Castaldo, I pointed out that I also welcome Serbia's chairmanship office of the OSCE in 2015, and I also underlined that Serbia could use its privileged position, especially with regard to Russia, to seek solutions for the current crisis in Ukraine. On the other hand, if we want a candidate country to align its policy fully, that also includes foreign policy. And with regard to the situation in Russia and Ukraine, there are differences between us in the European Union and Serbia. Serbia supported the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine in general terms, but was absent at the vote of the UN General Assembly resolution on the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And, of course, as I pointed out, Serbia didn't align itself when invited with Council decisions introducing restrictive measures in the context of Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea and events in eastern Ukraine. The second remark I would like to make is on energy. In my report, I tried to underline that progress was made in the area of energy, in particular in the electricity market, renewable energy and energy efficiency. However, additional efforts are needed to achieve cost-reflective electricity tariffs and a final decision on the unbundling model of Serbia gas in line with the acquis needs to be urgently made. I agree with Ms. Lunacek that Serbia needs to increase its efforts to meet its renewable energy targets. And finally, the first and last comment I would like to make is something I read on the German news agency yesterday evening. Yesterday evening, the German DPA said that Serbia has threatened to boycott the high-level dialogue on the 9th of February in Brussels should the Kosovo Parliament decide to acquire the mine in Trepča. Now, this is a very complicated issue. We can't go into detail today, but I would strongly like to underline it is very important that the high-level dialogue takes place on the 9th of February so we can get more progress in the normalization progress between Pristina and Belgrade. So I do hope that these news aren't correct or won't actually happen. Once again, I would like to invite you all, especially, of course, the shadow rapporteurs, to present your amendments until the 27th of January, 12 o'clock, high noon. Thank you.